Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun, is one of the most revered deities in Japanese mythology. She is said to bring light, life, and warmth to the world, governing both the heavens and the earth. In ancient legends, Amaterasu is a symbol of balance, protecting nature and ensuring harmony among all living things. Her influence is profound, and the respect for her is woven deeply into Japan's spiritual and cultural fabric. In some stories, Amaterasu's spirit extended to protect sacred places on earth, blessing them with peace and prosperity. Aokigahara was one such place, a forest she guarded with a gentle yet powerful presence. But when that peace was broken, Amaterasu's light withdrew, leaving the forest vulnerable to shadows and sorrow. Tonight, we step into the shadowy depths of Aokigahara, a forest shrouded in legend. Before its dark reputation took hold, it was a place of harmony, protected by the benevolent light of the sun goddess, Amaterasu. But when humans broke the sacred pact, she withdrew her light, leaving Aokigahara cursed and haunted by restless souls. This is the story of how the forest lost its guardian, and what happened when four friends ventured into the heart of its mysteries. Amaterasu's protection. Aokigahara was once a sanctuary, blessed by Amaterasu herself, the goddess of the sun. Revered as a protector of life and balance, her light touched every tree, flower, and stream, ensuring peace for all who respected the forest. Villagers would visit shrines at the forest's edge, leaving offerings of flowers and rice as tokens of their gratitude. But there was one solemn warning: harm the forest, and Amaterasu's light would vanish, leaving Aokigahara vulnerable to the shadows. For centuries, people honored this pact, knowing the goddess's presence kept the forest safe. Then came a time of desperation. During a particularly harsh winter, a group of outsiders arrived, ignoring the villagers' warnings and cutting down trees to survive. They laughed, dismissing the idea of a divine protector, certain that no goddess could stop them. As tree after tree fell, the forest grew darker, as if the sunlight itself withdrew in mourning. On the seventh day, the shrine of Amaterasu was desecrated, her statue shattered, offerings scattered like mere debris. And then she left. Witnesses claimed they saw a radiant figure rise from the shrine's ruins, her light dimming as she turned away from the desecrated forest. As she departed, her voice echoed through the trees with a final, haunting warning.
"No peace shall remain here. I leave you to the darkness."
Amaterasu's light faded, leaving the forest unprotected. And in her absence, a far darker presence began to stir. Those who dare to enter Aokigahara today often feel a strange sensation, a heaviness in the air, as if hundreds of unseen eyes are watching. Locals say that the spirits still roam the woods, trapped there by the curse of the abandoned deity. They say that if you enter the forest with anger or sorrow in your heart, the spirits will sense it, pulling you deeper until you can no longer find your way out. So, if you ever find yourself in Aokigahara, remember to tread carefully. Some places are still haunted by the ghosts of broken promises and abandoned spirits. The forest may look beautiful, but sometimes beauty is only the mask that hides a curse. Now I am going to share a story after the forest had lost its guardian. Jin, Kyohei, Midori, and Banri were four friends with a shared love for mystery and adventure. Skeptical of ghost stories, they dismissed the legends and ventured into Aokigahara one evening, laughing and joking. But as they walked deeper into the forest, an eerie silence began to settle, as if the trees themselves were watching. They'd all heard the tales of souls trapped in Aokigahara, lost in the shadows forever, but to Jin, it was just another thrilling adventure. Rustling intensifies, faint whispering in the background. Midori was the first to feel it, a faint whisper that seemed to call her name. She stopped, her heart pounding. "Did you hear that?" she asked, glancing nervously at the others. They paused, listening closely, and could make out soft voices drifting through the trees just beyond their sight. At first, they brushed it off as the wind, but the whispers grew louder, closer, as if they were being followed. An hour later, Banri stopped, frowning. Wait, wasn't that tree here before? The group looked around, realizing they had been circling the same spot. What had started as a fun adventure was becoming a twisted maze, every path somehow leading back to where they started. Jin tried to laugh it off, but even he couldn't ignore the heavy feeling settling over them, a sense that the forest was leading them somewhere. A sudden breeze, faint whispers turning into distinct voices. Kyohei, usually the calmest of the group, froze, pointing into the shadows. "Jin, do you see that?" In the darkness between the trees, a pale face appeared, its hollow eyes fixed on them, its mouth twisted in a silent scream. Jin took a cautious step forward, but the figure vanished, leaving only a chilling whisper in the air. Heart pounding, they turned to leave, but as they quickened their pace, the whispers grew louder, surrounding them, forming a single message: "Leave, while you still can." Just as they stumbled out of the forest's edge, they glanced back, and through the trees, shadowy figures watched them, unblinking and silent. Since Amaterasu's departure, Aokigahara Forest has become a place of restless spirits, cursed by the loss of its protector. Those who enter feel a strange, watchful presence, as though hundreds of unseen eyes track their every move. Locals say that if you enter with anger or sorrow in your heart, the spirits will pull you deeper, ensnaring you in their endless, dark vigil. So, would you dare to venture into such a place? Thank you for joining me in unraveling the mystery of Aokigahara. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and let me know if you would dare to visit a place like this. Second story: a leaky ceiling upset my poltergeist roommate. So, I'm generally a skeptic about supernatural things, but mostly in the sense that I don't think they exist strictly within the confines of whatever our most popular definitions happen to be at the time. What we perceive is also limited by our ability to perceive, and our brains love to fill in the blanks when we don't understand what we're experiencing. That being said, I have seen what I can only describe as spirits, entities throughout my life, and there is no grounded, realistic explanation for what I've seen. I do not have schizophrenia or sleep paralysis. I have never used hallucinogenic drugs, and I am not so desperate for attention that I would feel the need to trick myself into having false memories just for the sake of gaining clout or an inflated sense of importance. I am sharing this one story now because I believe it is interesting, and I don't want my memory of it to become lost to time. Early in September of last year, 2023, here in Austin, Texas, I was woken up around 0400 by my smoke alarm going off. It had been raining, and several gallons of rusty brown water had pooled in the inaccessible cavity above my top third-floor apartment. The water had funneled into drained through the smoke alarm in my living room, frying it and leaving a large, slimy puddle on the floor, and yes, I slipped on it cartoonishly. I sopped up the mess and set up a large metal bowl below the leak. Then I went back to bed because I had to work in a few hours. I had had very few unusual problems with the apartment for the 5 years leading up to this. Though I felt like I was always being watched, my foot was grabbed, wiggled once, and I had only occasionally been woken up by shouts, breaths by my face. And the complex was built in 2015, but a week after the initial leak, I started to find the hand towels in my bathroom strewn across the floor. The first 5 times I didn't see how they ended up there, so I figured that maybe I was placing them on the towel rack precariously, and the AC was knocking them down. The next 6 times it happened, though, I saw the towels launch off the rack at a 90-degree angle from the wall with enough speed force to bounce off the opposing wall. I was living alone with no pets and working from home, and each occurrence was during the daytime when my AC was turned off, and after the first 5 unseen occurrences, it would only happen when I was looking at it. The apartment's maintenance team patched up the first leak in my ceiling after about 2 weeks. But then we had a major hailstorm, and the roof above my ceiling became even more damaged. Leaks bubbled and dripped across the ceiling in every room, and were not fixed for 3 months. I was extremely anxious about the ceiling potentially collapsing, and the activity got worse, more frequent throughout this time period. In addition to towels still launching in the bathroom and then in the kitchen pans flung onto the ground when they had been sitting on the drying rack next to the sink. One time I didn't even hear the pan move. I left it sitting flat by the sink after cleaning it, and I went into the other room. Then when I came back, it was approximately 9 feet away over by the front door. During this time, I'd often hear loud stomps moving across the ceiling late at night, between 2200 and 0300. I was on the third top floor and there was no way to access the sloped roof, and it was far too late in the day for a lone roofing contractor to be up there with a 30-plus foot ladder. The only rational, non-paranormal explanation I could think of was that it was an auditory illusion, where the stomps were being made by a person either below or to the side of my unit, and the vibrations traveled up through the walls and out of different places in my ceiling. The thumps were arrhythmic and differed in intensity, and they did not occur during any other time of day, so I ruled out plumbing or HVAC. I also started to hear heavy scratching, scraping in the walls and across the ceiling near my bed, and only at night, but that could easily be attributed to pests, wildlife, and I had seen raccoons lumbering about the neighborhood. Given what happened next, though, it seems relevant. I occasionally addressed the entity throughout this 3-month period, stating something along the lines of, "It's okay that you live here as long as you're a good roommate. Please don't try to scare or hurt me, and please don't break my stuff. I mean you no harm." The next night, I felt another paper-cut sting, this time on my right foot. When I looked down, I saw a fresh bite mark, a full semicircle with deep impressions of 3 gap-toothed human incisors encompassing the 3 smaller toes. I felt a presence crouching next to me behind the chair, but it didn't feel hostile despite what had happened. It felt like a scared animal with its tail tucked, almost human. At this point, I understood that something that had been residing peacefully in the crawl space was feeling displaced by the leaky roof ceiling. It didn't like the situation any more than I did, but it was growing impatient. Whether or not this presence was the same one that scratched me, or the same one that had been throwing things, I'll never truly know. I put some Neosporin on the fresh bite mark, then I changed my assertion to, "Be at peace, they will fix this soon, and you can finally rest again. In the meantime, do not touch me. I have done everything I can to speed them up, but it's beyond my control. I mean you no harm, be well." And the tension pressure in the room quickly dissipated. I stupidly didn't take any photos of the scratch rebite, primarily because I didn't want my feet pics to be out there, but both injuries took about 5 to 6 weeks to heal fade. The activity became limited to impatient stomping sounds for the next few weeks after the bite. Then in mid-December, when they finally replaced my ceiling, the activity ended abruptly, and the tension in the air was completely gone. For a time. Later in January, the roofers finally came and spent 5 days, from 700 to 1830, hammering, drilling, ripping apart the damaged roof and replacing it with a new one. This process was extremely loud, violent, and the vibrations were strong enough to crack the tiles in my shower. During this 5-day stretch, the nightly stomping and daily towel throwing returned. The lid of my garbage can violently flipped open and popped off its hinges, and this time I actually saw the upset presence sulking in the corner. It looked like a lean, emaciated adolescent with sullen, cataracted eyes, gapped teeth, dark matted hair of medium length, pale, bluish-gray skin, and they were wearing a plain but filthy white t-shirt and boxer shorts. They looked damp, cold, and sad while sitting there between my chair and the wall, holding their knees, clouded eyes searching in my direction, taking deep, labored breaths. I froze while looking at them, and after what seemed like 5 to 10 seconds, they were gone. At this point, I didn't want to feed any more of my fear or anxious energy to it, and I didn't even want to acknowledge or invoke the presence until I had found some way to protect myself. I didn't know if it was something to legitimately feel sorry for, or if it was something that wanted to trick me into opening myself up to it through empathy. I started burning white sage candles the next day, and I kept them burning almost any time I was present and awake inside the apartment. Given the history of things being thrown, I didn't want to leave a flame unsupervised. I'd occasionally carry one of these candles and cleanse every corner of every room, reciting, "I wish you peace, I wish you happiness, I wish you tranquility, and I wish you rest." This seemed to keep things mostly quiet all the way up through late June when I moved out. There were still occasional stomps, and when I ran out of candles one day, it threw a figure off of a shelf and broke a plate in the kitchen. Though luckily, Elle haven't had any such experiences in my new apartment since. I'm not sure where this energy came from. I don't know if it had been there the whole time or if it was something transient. I just know that I never summoned anything or went to any known haunted locations, bringing home attachments, leading up to this time period. The electromagnetic field did feel high in that apartment, which could discredit anything weird I saw after 5 to 5.5 years of prolonged exposure, but that wouldn't explain objects moving or the injuries on my leg. I did have many posters in reflective frames set up throughout the apartment, some of which were facing directly across from each other, and one popular idea is that mirrors facing each other like that can create a portal or vortex for energy. At the time, I was working at an exceptionally shitty job with an awful manager, and many documents I processed for this job contained information for photographs of injured, maimed, and deceased clients. Several documents were quite graphic and distressing, and a lot of my childhood trauma was beginning to bubble back up to the surface right before all of this happened. My unscientific speculation, and this is pure speculation, is that my heightened distress fed into the surrounding energy. This coincided with the roof issues and amplified whatever was already going on. One or more entities could have been displaced from the crawl space by the leaky roof, or they could have been attached to the land for a longer time and were drawn to my heightened stress, negative energy. Or maybe it was all transient energy drifting by that somehow became trapped and manifested itself in different ways. The only thing that's certain is that there's no way for me to definitively know what happened, and that's okay.